If you've checked out the videos for how to create content and questions and how to create scores, the next logical step is to create a report. So I'm going to bring up an assessment that already has some questions and some scores, and we're going to walk through building out a simple report. Click on the Edit button within the test that I'd like to edit. And as you can see here, I have a handful of questions that I've created and a handful of scores, a couple of total point scores. And I'm going to create a simple report. You do so by clicking on Reports, and we try to make it as easy as possible. You can click on New Report. Within that new report, you can decide who views it, what the name is. I'm going to call this Summary, who it's visible to, where it's visible, and then the system reports are all listed here. And in this case, you would want to select the scores that you'd like to show in that system report. There are a handful, 3 at this point. Out-of-box reports, summary, detail, and all values report. I'll click all values just so we can see everything within this test. It's going to show scores, demographics, responses, and these are samples because you have to take the test to see it, and the timing and some of that information on the test. So it's more or less just a dump of everything that's happened for that individual candidate for that individual test. So that's one way to create a report. But the real richness in our report editor comes in your ability to create custom reports. So I changed this to custom, and because we're super creative, I'm going to call this custom. And I'm going to make it a portrait orientation. I'm going to have a thin red border around it, which might look a little obnoxious, but it's there for us. Think of this as a piece of paper. On the left-hand side, I can drag pieces onto my paper. So I'm using cutting and pasting and moving it onto a piece of paper that has a portrait orientation. On the right-hand side are some of the formatting options that I can do with that piece of paper. So we'll just start by example. Let's say the top of my test has a logo. And I think I have a silly logo out here of Batman, just so you can get an idea of what that looks like. So I've now pasted Batman on the top of the page. But you know what, Jared? I don't like that this is top, center, and spanning the whole line or row. So I could put some content out here. Let's say I want to put the test taker's name. You can go in and pull tokens from the database. So if I want the tester's first name, I don't type it in manually, I pull it from the database, and last name, I can pull those tokens in. They just have to have the % before and after. And then I can format this text. I can bold it. I can make it so that it centers in that space, and I could change the font. Let's make this font just a little larger. I'm sorry, a little larger, and we'll make it 20. Then I hit finish. You can see it put it right next to this piece of the Batman logo. It's up in the top. So we can click on this eyeball and see what our report is going to look like. We can generate some random values and preview that report. So from a custom report perspective, here's what it's going to look like. There's our red line. There's our Batman logo. This text looks a little big. And then we can start to format so it looks better for us. I'm going to edit this text and say that font at 20 was a bit high. Let's move it down to 16. I might want some vertical padding in this cell. I could say I want the top to be 0.5 inches, and you can see it move that text down so it centers along the Batman scale. I could add other attributes to this, but that's the way to kind of get started. Then I can move down the report. Let's say I want a new row, and I want to put a donut chart in this row. All I do here is name my chart. I can set a background color on this chart if I want to. But let's do something simple. We'll add customer service, we'll add innovation, and we will add a score for flexibility. So we have 3 scores, and they're all going to be this black color. So it's going to look kind of pointless on this donut chart where each of them have the same color. I'm going to quickly add a radar chart right next to it that's almost identical, and you can start to see how the report can evolve. So I'm going to add a score here. It's going to be customer service. I'm going to add a score here. It's going to be innovation. And I'm going to add a score here. There'll be flexibility. Once again, all black. So you can see how this is looking not quite so formatted, but I added it to a row. If I wanted to move this donut chart up to the top of the screen, I could do that by just clicking and dragging on it and moving it to wherever I want to move it. So it's a what you see is what you get editor, and you can drag and move things around. But to bring this to life a little bit, I'm going to add some colors. So let's say I want it to be green to light green, and I want this to be a left to right gradient. And I can move these all to be left to right gradients, which is, some people might say, a better way to look at charts. And I'll make this blue to blue, or blue to purple, and then I'll do this one at this maroon to something a little more red. And when I finish, you can start to see, it's a little obnoxious, but you can start to see how you can format that donut chart to make it look a little bit more like you want. And then there's some advanced options up here. Perhaps I want it to be 3D and I don't want to show the legend. I click those off and my donut chart starts to look a little different. The same, if not more, options are available within the radar chart, which I won't go into. You can set the axis scales, background colors. You can even set background images or change the style of the radar chart as desired. And I'll quickly change this from a circle to a polygon, and you can see how that changed slightly. That's really the way to create reports. It just becomes an exercise in previewing and saying, do I like the way this looked? So I've got two things up at the top, and I've got Batman and my name, and it just doesn't look very formatted. So you can start to add other pieces to this report to make it look better. I'm going to create a new row. I'm going to create a content row, and there's a little trick in here where you can insert a horizontal line if you wish. And I'm going to take that horizontal line and I'm going to move it up in between these. So you can just quickly see that as I generate those random scores again, there's a horizontal line between it, and maybe it's starting to look a little better. We'll add one more chart type just so you can see some of the formatting options, and I'm going to call this a narrative map. And I'm going to say for the score, overall score, if they get between 1 and 27, this is arbitrary, I'm going to say not so good. And if they score between a range of 28 and say 72, I'm going to say average. And you'll have to bear with my very simple examples, but you can start to visualize how you can give text outputs based on the scores that come out. And I could say Tony the Tiger, they're great. And I could click finish, and I now have a not so good expression. I'm going to get a little more creative here. I'm going to add a new row, and I'm going to drag this radar chart down here into this one. And I'm going to say I want this donut chart here to be 2 rows. So the donut chart is going to span 2 rows, and everything else is going to be 1 row. You can see it's spanning a row. It can span columns as well. And just click on the eyeball and see how those reports will change. Now I still might not have this perfect, but great. And this radar chart are in 2 rows, and the donut chart spans them. And just to make this visual a little more clear, we'll add a format to this where we pad it 1/2 inch. Well, we'll pad it 1.5 inches, and then you'll start to see how it just how the formatting or how the spanning makes it look a little different. So now you can see it span. So imagine up here you had some decent text coming out. You had the donut spanning 2 rows, and in the bottom corner you had this radar chart. Really, the sky's the limit with creating a report. You have page setup options where you can set header text, footer text, and set the margins. And then you have all of these widgets over here on the left at your disposal to make a really professional report. You are provided settings, and then to save a report, you just click on this Save button here. To publish a report, just like anything else, you would click the Publish button. And your reports are now available in drop-downs for you to toggle through. So that's just a quick overview of creating custom and standard reports.